people these days are different than, even 15 years ago when I started advising, because they really had this mentality of I have to be I have to be clear title to the house by the time I retire. And these days, more and more people are like, well, you know what? I've got so much debt, mortgage debt, consumer debt, car loan, all this stuff. I'm going to have debt for the rest of my life. They're resigned to that fact. So why not have a good debt rather than bad debt? Right? So it's changing because people are recognizing that doing things the way maybe our parents or grandparents did it isn't going to cut it. It's not going to work.
100%. One of the things that I've got to make a video on one of these days actually came from Mr. Harrison, and we had him out last week and kind of ran through things, but was the concept of you got to buy $100,000 car. It's going to be I think it was a six-year loan at 6% interest. But if you finance it, you can invest with a guaranteed 4% return versus do you just buy the car in cash? And if you buy the car in cash, you save 19 grand in interest and you end up with no investment. If you finance it, you end up with $19,000 of interest costs and about $25,000 of investment value or growth of your $100,000 by the end of these 6 years. And it really, I've started to use it with clients because it's almost like that counterintuitive. You would never borrow at 6% so you can invest at 4%, but actually it makes sense in that example. And it's when you start to extrapolate those numbers out over 20, 30 years, it's like, hey, Canadians need to have a very serious shift of our headspace and our financial literacy, because the schooling system, you're lucky if the schooling system teaches you to write a check.
Yeah.
They teach you credit debt is bad. And that's about it. There's nothing about tax returns, savings, credit.
And so where do we learn our personal finances? We learn it from our parents who are not financial professionals. We learn it as soon as we get old enough from our friends who aren't.
Or that lovely individual at that lovely location that just wants us to get that mortgage insurance they sell. And oh yeah, we'll get you that creditor protection, and oh, let's get your new bank account, and another credit card, and oh, make sure no one pulls your credit because that's bad. Meanwhile, nobody's ever heard of credit utilization. It's definitely a skewed system, but I appreciate that you've written the books and you've got the homeowners course. And that's actually for everybody watching this, one of the most common trends for the clients I come across that know the strategy extremely well and that are really well versed in it. Every single one has taken the homeowners course. And I don't know if it's because the course is exceptional. I think it is. Or if it's because the people that take the course are very serious and dedicated. But either way, there's that connection. The people who take the course are consistently on the ball, they get it, and none of them are about to do really stupid things. So, but I want to thank you for coming out, Robinson, and I figured that we'd let everybody see you and who you are, and you're kind of our illustrious leader in the SMCP program, and it's 2 parts Robinson regularly training us and keeping us up to date, and he's spending more time connecting with all the different professionals and really staying on top of changes and making sure that the other professionals are tipped off and getting speakers regularly. It's been great. But one part, Robinson's also the hitman of the industry in our world, and he's got really high standards of how people should perform and what SMCP really means. And I don't know if you've had to make anyone sleep with the fishes, but I definitely know that you do a good job of making sure that everybody's representing what SMCP is and what the Smith maneuver is and what the purpose is. And it's not to sell things, but rather to help people.
Yeah, that's very important. I mean, I have a lot of conversations with professionals who are interested in becoming a Smith maneuver certified professional, and if they bring up the question of how much more money can they make early on in the conversation, I tend to make that a quick phone call. And I'm fortunate, just I guess the way the program is structured and all that sort of good stuff, that the people who do decide to come through and go through the program are the types of professionals who understand that they have one job as a financial professional, and that is to make the financial lives of their clients better. And they realize they have the ability to absorb knowledge on something new, and to disseminate that knowledge to their clients, at least to give them an opportunity to make the decision of whether they want to implement the strategy or not. There's too many financial professionals out there who are doing things the same way they have for years. Why would I go out and learn something new? I'm making a really good living doing things the way I've always done them. and they're depriving their clients choice to make a decision of whether they want to take a certain strategy on or a certain route, because their clients aren't being informed. They don't know about it. And so that's what's pretty fortunate about the Smith Mover Certified Professional Network, is that these are all professionals who know that the way to build their business is to provide something exceptional to their clients and get their clients talking. We would sign up clients when I was actively advising, and then 3 months later, that one client would send 3 or 4 people in, right? Because they're sitting around talking about the Smith Mover to barbecue. Hey, you heard about Smith Mover? No. Well, I just started doing it. Here's what it is. I'm not going to fully explain it. Go talk to Rob or go talk to Fraser, And so, you build a really sticky client base as a professional with something as specific and specialized as a Smith Maneuver, and your clients very much appreciate it. And that's how you build a business, not by buying down rate, or if you're a mortgage broker, or cutting corners if you're some other type of financial professional. So very pleased how things are going.
Do you mind jumping into maybe the 2 to 5 minute breakdown of, from your perspective as one of the authors of the book, what the Smith Maneuver is, what its purpose is, and then do you want to just start diving into kind of how it functions in the different accelerators?
Yeah, sure. I don't have a lot of time, and everybody, this was a last minute invite by Keaton. So I don't have a whole lot of time to commit to this, unfortunately. I wish I did, but in any event, yeah, I mean, my father Fraser developed the strategy back in the mid 80s, because he realized there was a problem here in Canada with the way the tax system was structured. And that is the fact that, when we compare ourselves to the Americans, they're able to and have been able to deduct a good portion of their mortgage interest from their income on their principal residence. And we here in Canada cannot. Now, that being said, we do have the advantage of capital gains exemption on sale of our principal residence, and the Americans do not. So, we're kind of even there. But once we throw in the fact that not only do we get the capital gains exemption, but we can also generate tax deductions for our mortgage, then we're way better off than our American cousins. So he developed that strategy. He put his private clients into it for a while, for about 15 years. Then he came out with his book, came out in 2002. There it is. But, and then came back into advising in 2005, and I joined him in 2006. So we worked side by side here in Victoria. But fundamental premise of this strategy is that, what we were talking about earlier, I think before you hit the record button, we're all trained to pay out our mortgage as fast as we can, be clear title to the house by the time we hit retirement. And with these days, especially with limited resources, what that means is that we're busy paying off our mortgage at the expense of not getting invested, because life is so expensive. Taxation is so high. Housing is high, right? So we take all we can, we pay down our mortgage. By the time we hit retirement, yeah, maybe we're clear title to the house, but we don't have any investment portfolio that we can rely on that can start sending us in retirement income. We're reliant on CPP and OAS, and that's not nearly enough. And this is why we see the proliferation of reverse mortgages, which are growing on uptake 30% a year. And these reverse mortgages, we're happy that they exist because there are people in this position where they simply are not going to be able to afford retirement. Well, now they can, there's a way. But if we have the ability to, then the foresight to be able to create a situation where we don't have to sign up for a reverse mortgage, then we're going to have choice. We're going to be significantly better off as far as I'm concerned. So the fundamental premise is, let's pull back that equity as fast as we're paying it down. Let's pull it back out and get it invested. And the very simple, basic, plain Jane Smith maneuver is simply using the mortgage payment that you're making already. If you're not doing the Smith maneuver, you're making a mortgage payment. If you are doing the Smith maneuver, you're making a mortgage payment, right? But whenever I make that payment, I can access the principal reduction on the other side of this mortgage, this readvanceable mortgage. So I pay down $1,000. I can pull back $1,000, and I can do whatever I wish with that $1,000. I can make a BMW payment, which is what a lot of Canadians do. And they get this type of mortgage either from their mortgage broker or their bank. No one's explained to them how this mortgage really works or how it should function. And so they get their first mortgage statement. Oh, wow, I got $1,000 on this line of credit. Fantastic. I'm going to go make a car payment each month. Wealth destruction. It's non-deductible borrowing. That card appreciates in value. If you use it correctly, pull that out, you get it invested. And you're going to start taking advantage of tax deductions because your tax bill reduces, and that tax relief allows you to prepay your mortgage once a year. Base case scenario here. And the more you prepay that mortgage, the faster it's gone. And every dollar of every prepayment goes 100% to principal. So it's very, very effective. So each month, I pull out the equity that I've created with that mortgage payment and I get it invested. We'll call it a constant amount. And something I won't talk about now, you probably got a good idea, maybe you talked about it already, Keaton, is the increasing efficiency of the regular mortgage payment, which means I still only have to come out of pocket with that regular mortgage payment. I can borrow each month to invest. I don't have to come out of pocket to service the interest on that borrowing. So pay it down, pull it out, and get it invested. Take that annual tax relief, prepay my mortgage, pull that out and get it invested as well. And that is the plain Jane Smith maneuver. That is as bare bones as it gets. But there are a number of accelerators, which I don't think in a dozen years and over 500 families as clients, I think maybe 5 or 6 of these families were only doing the plain Jane, and everybody else had access to at least one of the accelerators. But the principle is the faster we pay down that bad non-deductible debt, the faster we're going to create deductions, the faster we're going to get rid of that mortgage, the faster we're going to build our investment portfolio. And so these accelerators are typically available to Canadians simply by restructuring what they've already got going on. Like if we look at the cash flow diversion accelerator, let's say I'm investing $400 a month, and I have been for a while. I'm one of the fortunate few that is able to, after I pay all the expensive bills of life, I still have $400 left over. And I've decided that I'm going to get that invested. And so I do that. I tell the investment company, come in, take this $400 from my bank account each and every month. I authorize you to do so, get it invested in this fund, in this stock, whatever you want to invest in. Well, if I have the right type of financing on the house, and this is where Keaton comes into play as a mortgage specialist, then I'm able to take that 400 and instead of investing it, I first prepay my own mortgage. And then I can access that $400 again and get it invested. And this is above and beyond that principal reduction from the regular mortgage payment. So each month I'm prepaying by $400 and I'm subsequently getting that invested. So I'm speeding up. It's quite effective each and every month. If you're prepaying by $400, that 25-year mortgage has gone much quicker. Your tax deductions accrue and build exponentially much quicker. Your portfolio builds much quicker. So, and that doesn't cost anything extra out of pocket because I was investing $400 a month already, and I still am. I'm just sending it over here, running it through the mortgage, and then I'm getting it invested. So no increased cash flow required for me, no reduction in my standard of living. So that's a monthly accelerator. There are periodic accelerators like the debt swap. That $400 a month has built up to $20,000. Let's just call it mutual funds, whether you like them or not. There's a whole bunch of different types of investments. Let's just say they're mutual funds. That $400 a month is built up to $20,000. Well, after I talk to Keaton, get the right type of mortgage, if I look at that investment of $20,000, what's my position on there? Am I gonna, if I redeem, am I gonna incur a large capital gains bill? Am I not? Maybe it's a capital loss. This is something you talk about with an advisor. But I can sell that $20,000 worth of mutual funds. Now I have cash, $20,000 of cash. I prepay my mortgage and I pull that $20,000 right back out. And I can do this in 3 days, 5 days a week, maybe, it all depends. But then I buy the exact same investment if I wish, or I can buy a different investment if I'm not happy with what I just sold. So I'm still invested by $20,000. I'm not invested for 7 days, but I'm still invested by $20,000. I have, however, $20,000 less expensive non-deductible debt, and I've generated tax deductions on $20,000 of new debt, not new debt, sorry, converted debt. So 20,000 bad debt down, 20,000 good debt up, but my total debt is the same as before I did this. So there's no change there. And that doesn't take anything out of my pocket. I had that $20,000, it was just in mutual funds. Cash it out, pay down, pull back, buy it again. And Keaton will run numbers for you all day long. That 25-year mortgage is going to take a good number of years off that mortgage. Pay that down quicker. So there's also The drip accelerator. Let's say I've done that. I've sold my $20,000 of mutual funds. I paid down my mortgage, pulled it back out, invested. A lot of people who are investing, they say, you know what? I'm trying to be good here. I'm trying to increase the financial security of my family. I don't want to do anything stupid. So I know that this mutual fund generates dividends. Maybe it's monthly, quarterly, annually, whatever it is. But I don't want to see those dividends in cash. Don't send them to me because I'm just going to spend them. Right. So that's what most people do. I'm in this for growth. I don't want to see those dividends. Automatically reinvest them each and every time they are generated. Well, what I can do is I can say, okay, I'm getting serious now. I do want to see those dividends in cash. So now I start to get those dividends periodically into my bank account. I take those dividends, I prepay my mortgage. Let's say it's $300. I pull back that $300 and I can buy the exact same mutual fund units that sent out that dividend, or shares that stock that sent out that dividend, or I can buy something else. But I'm still invested by that dividend, whether it was being reinvested automatically or coming to me in cash. But I first prepaid my bad debt, created good debt, and bought the same asset. And that'll take a good number of years off your mortgage as well. So that's the drip accelerator. The talk about prime the pump next. This accelerator is new borrowing. So this is pure leverage. I don't have the right type of mortgage. Hi, Tara. See, Tara just joined in. I don't have the right type of mortgage. So I go to my SMCP. I say, hey, I need the right type of mortgage. My house has increased in value over the years. My mortgage balance has gone down as I've been paying off my mortgage conventionally like everybody else. So when I get my mortgage refied into the right type of mortgage, it may be the case that I've got some equity I can pull out and put to work right away. Maybe it's $50,000, maybe it's $100,000, maybe it's $200,000. Well, at that point, I have an opportunity. Maybe I've always been interested in investment real estate. Maybe I like stocks. Maybe I like bonds. Whatever the case may be, I can pull that out and I can invest it. Now, this additional borrowing, I should be responsible enough to come out of pocket with the money that's going to cost me to borrow that new borrowing and use that to prepay my mortgage. Therefore, when it's available again, it can service the incremental interest expense on that prime the pump amount. So I have the ability to pull out a chunk and invest it directly. Where? It's up to me in the discussions I have with my professionals. But what a lot of people do is they're interested in investment real estate. Maybe they don't have any yet, but they want some. Well, here's an opportunity. If I've got access to $100,000, I can use that as a down payment on my first rental property. So stocks, bonds, mutual funds, mix, REITs, real estate, right? Or maybe start my own business out of my garage. But what that does is that generates a significant amount of immediately tax deductible debt, which does good things to my tax bill. And because of the incremental interest on that new borrowing, I'm coming out of pocket $100, $150 a month to prepay my mortgage in order to service the interest on that borrowing. Therefore, my mortgage goes away faster. Plus, I've bought this asset, which is going to start growing. And we all know that the sooner you invest, the more you invest, the longer your timeline, and the better you're going to do with that investment. So that's the prime the pump accelerator. Now, let's say that someone took that $100,000 after refi and they went and bought their first rental property. Right? They've always wanted to own rental property. Here's their opportunity to get into the market. They go, they get the rental property, they find some renters, and they start receiving their rental receipts each and every month. Let's call it $3,000. Well, what most Canadians do when they have a new rental property is they open up a bank account specific to that property. And the rental receipts come into that account, and then the monthly expenses on that rental property come out. So $3,000 comes in from the renters. That's great. Feels good. Like to see it going in there. But you got to make the mortgage payment on that rental. You got to maintenance, property tax, all these different expenses on your new business, that rental property. And so this is what most Canadians do if they're not aware. If their Smith Manoeuvre certified professional hasn't told them about this. But what they can do is, instead of taking those rental receipts and waiting to service the expenses on that rental property, take that $3,000 in cash, make a prepayment against your own mortgage on the house in which you live. So you're making your regular mortgage payment, you've got 3,000 coming from the renters. That's a prepayment. And Keaton will tell you, this is where we see 25-year mortgages being gone in 8 years, 7 years. $3,000 prepayment, it's gone very, very quickly. And realize that the faster you're paying down bad debt, the faster you're generating accelerating tax deductions. So you're doing wonderful things to your tax bill faster and sooner. So you take your rental receipts, you pay down your mortgage, that line of credit, that HELOC opens up dollar for dollar. And so I can pull that $3,000 out again. And that's when I send it to my bank account that's dedicated to my rental property. And then I make the mortgage payment on that rental property. Then I make the maintenance payments, the property tax, all that stuff. So the money from my renters is coming in and it's going out. But first, after it comes in, I run it through my mortgage and do fantastic things for my financial situation. And then I service the expenses. And the nice thing about this is that the interest on that monthly $3,000 borrowing to service the expenses on this rental property is tax deductible. Why? Because the test is, as we should all know by now, if we're looking at whether borrowing is tax deductible or not, the test is, what did you do with the borrowed money? If you borrowed it to consume, buy a car, pay off your credit card, buy groceries, go on vacation. No, you borrowed to consume, you cannot deduct. But if you borrowed to invest with the reasonable expectation of generating income, you can deduct the interest. And that's what we're doing. Or after we prepay by our rental receipts, we're pulling it back out to invest in our business, that rental property. And sure as heck, it does generate income. We're getting those rental receipts each and every month. So now you combine one or more of these accelerators and the numbers start to get silly, actually. So it's really powerful stuff. One of the one last bit about the cash flow dam, sorry, is if my rental receipts are $3,000, I'm prepaying by $3,000, I'm pulling $3,000 out. But if my expenses on that rental property are only $2,500 a month, I have the difference of $500 that I can invest elsewhere in securities or like stocks, bonds, whatever it is. So you've got additional portfolio growth there. And we're not talking even about the growth of that rental property value and the increase in wealth. And if you guys ever get to the point where you're talking about priming the pump, buying a rental property, cash flow dam, if you're ever talking about that with Keaton, your SMCP mortgage broker, well, ask them about, well, how should I finance my rental property, right? What type of mortgage do I want on my rental property? Don't ask them the question, I Smith maneuver my mortgage on that rental property, because there's no opportunity to do that. Smith maneuver is a debt conversion strategy. We're converting non-deductible debt to tax deductible debt. And the mortgage on your rental property is already tax deductible. So there's no opportunity for the Smith maneuver there. But as we've seen, it can greatly speed up the power of your Smith maneuver on your principal residence. That being said, you as a new business owner, and you've got your plan for how you want to go through life and where you want to go. And does that look like when you hit a certain period in your life, your rental property is also clear title? Is that where you want to go? Or do you want to maintain as much tax deductible debt on that property as possible so that you can invest the difference as regards to positive cash flow or payments on that rental property? And if so, it may be worthwhile getting a readvanceable mortgage on that rental property too, because then, if you're a true real estate investor, if I've got a rental property, if I'm making principal plus interest payments on it, that mortgage balance is going down. Tax deductible debt is decreasing. My tax benefit is decreasing. And then, so you know what? I'm going to behave like a true real estate investor. I'm going to pull the equity from my rental property and buy a second rental. Well, now you have to go through the qualification process. Maybe this is 3-5 years after you buy your first, depending on what happens with the world. You got to requalify. Keaton's going to ask you, okay, I need all these documents. We got to get an appraisal, blah, 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 and legals and all that stuff. It's a hassle. It's expensive. So do it right the first time. Get a readvanceable mortgage on that rental property. And it's like, as another SMCP said, which stuck with me, it's like you're refinancing that rental property each and every month, because when you make that principal plus interest payment on that rental, you can get back at that equity, pull it out to invest, right? Build up an investment fund such that at some point when it's enough to cash out and buy your second rental property, you can do so. So there you go. That's me talking nonstop and a little bit thirsty.
Amazing. Well, I appreciate it. I know you got to run, so I really thank you coming out and just kind of giving your perspective on it and sharing a little.
Yeah, well, I hope it was understandable for those of you who are hearing this the first time. I tend to get excited about this stuff, and I could probably explain things a little simpler, but I sort of forget to and tend to run on. But in any event, that's why we've got SMCPs. Anyways, I'm going to finish off. I do have to head out, but I'm going to finish off by saying congratulations to everybody, because it is very rare that people take an active interest in their personal finances. Because it's either boring or scary, or I've got better things to do, like go have a beer and watch The Simpsons or whatever the case may be. But it's not easy out there. It's tough. It's getting tougher. Taxation is increasing. We've got inflation. We've got expensive housing. And the people who do not do anything are falling further and further behind. Whether it's the Smith Maneuver, whether it's some other investment strategy, we all have to take action, or we're not even treading water. So congratulations on being here, on listening to what Keaton and Andrew have to say. We've got other SMCPs across the country, and quite pleased how the network is being built out. We got the ability to service Canadians from coast to coast, whether it's regards to their financing, whether it's regards to their investing or accounting needs. So anyways, Keaton, you started this book club. I'm going to hand it over to you, but I'm going to say goodnight to everybody here, and I wish you all the best, and chat soon.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks again. So what the game plan is going to be for the rest of the night is I'm going to dive into the flow of funds for kind of the standard Smith maneuver. I was debating if we're going to go through all the accelerators and how it flows, but admission, I have a life and a job, and I got busy with the mortgage brokering side of things, so I didn't get them all done, but I am going to do them over the weekend and send them to everybody. Little weather forecast of the real estate market, though, it's getting crazy really fast. We're seeing like multiple offers in all over Vancouver, BC, the island, seeing in the prairies, Alberta, Edmonton, multiples. I don't know what happened, but I guess if everybody takes a home buying holiday for a year, that demand builds up, and here we are. So I'm just going to jump straight into this will be relatively quick, but I think it's one of the things that people get really hung up on. And I am going to share, see if this works. Should have just done the full screen sharing. 2 seconds. I'm just going to do this the easy way. You guys can see that I got this set up in my PowerPoint. We'll go with the basic way. But I wanted to just set up something to visually show you guys. Andrew, can you nod if you can see this? Perfect. A lot of people get really hung up on how the money flows, and it's really not that complex. There's really like 3 real steps. We'll call it 4 that you're doing with the Smith maneuver. And that is, you're making your mortgage payment. Pretty basic. You do that every month anyways. The next thing that happens is that your mortgage product, when set up correctly, the amount of debt you pay off on your mortgage automatically becomes available on your line of credit. So there's not even really a step there for you. Once that room's available, you take the money off your line of credit and you transfer it to your Smith Maneuver checking account. Once it's in your Smith Maneuver checking account, you're going to do 2 things with it. One is you're going to pay off the interest that you owed for the previous month on that line of credit, and then you're going to invest the difference. So basic flow of money. I'm calling it your personal checking account, but wherever you have money that you use to pay your mortgage, it can be your piggy bank. It doesn't matter. You take the money you have and you pay your mortgage. It becomes available on your investment line of credit. You then transfer the room available on your investment line of credit to your Smith Maneuver checking account. The money in this account then does 2 things. It goes to pay the interest on the investment line of credit, and the remainder goes to get invested. It's that simple. It takes 3 to 10 minutes a month, depending on the process that you use and how you invest. If you want to minimize the workload, you can do this every 3 months. You still need to pay. You'll still need to take the Smith Maneuver checking account and pay the investment HELOC every month. But you can choose to do this last investing step every 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, once a year. Sometimes real estate investors will invest kind of like a snake eats. It'll be every 2 years when they have enough money to buy a property. But the beauty of this is that it can be customized to the amount of time you have, as well as what your personal goals are, your personal risk tolerances, and how you want to invest. There's one other thing that I want to share with you guys, and this is going to be the more advanced version. This is not pretty. This is for, if you find the strategy a little confusing, my advice is just tune out right now. That being said, if you're a bit of a numbers nerd and you want to really see how this works, this is kind of the behind the scenes. And this is what I do on a Wednesday night, knowing that I have to meet with all of you the next day. Is I sit up with my wife while she watches soap operas or whatever she watches, Netflix, and I built this. It's just a quick demonstration. You'll notice that there's the steps. We've got step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. But this is the math behind the scenes. So this is over a 1-year window. We have a mortgage. In this example is a $500,000 mortgage at 5% interest. The numbers don't really matter. This is just to demonstrate the breakdown of everything. So you make your mortgage payment. On this mortgage, $2,060 goes to interest and $606 goes to paying off the debt. So now your balance drops a little bit on your mortgage and your HELOC limit increases. You now have $606 available. This is month 1. So you borrow it on your HELOC. You now owe $606.50. You move it over to your Smith Maneuver checking account. Now, in this case, I set a $2,000 balance as the neutral point. I'm going to explain that after, but simplicity's sake, your Smith Maneuver checking account increases by $606. It's your first month, so you don't owe any interest. Great. You invest $606. Great. You've now got a $606 balance and you've invested $606. The next month happens. You make your payment. You pay a little bit less interest. You get a little bit more that goes towards your principal, and this is the increasing efficiency, which we'll talk about in a minute. Your balance diminishes. You borrow off your HELOC, so your HELOC limit's gone up. Then you borrow off it. Your balance goes up. You move it over to your Smith Maneuver check account. Oh no, you owe $3.64 from last month's borrowing. So step 3, you pay that $3.64 from your Smith Maneuver checking account. You invest the difference. You rinse and repeat. This happens over and over and over. Now, this is how you do the plain Jane Smith maneuver with no new money. You'll notice that the only payment being made from you personally is the mortgage payment. What's going to happen is that you're going to owe a little bit more interest every single month, and you're going to invest a little bit less, but it's still going to balance out. But at the end of the year, you're going to get your tax return. You're going to get to write off all of this interest that you've paid. It's not much to start, but this is assuming you're starting with basically 0. You get to write this off. You get a little bit of a tax return. It reduces your tax bill because you've paid this tax deductible interest. Now, this may be offset by some of your investments, so you have to be aware of how you're investing. But at the end of the day, you get a little bit of a tax refund, hopefully. You take that tax refund and you pay it against the balance of your mortgage. Now, you'll notice that every month, the amount of interest you pay goes down a little bit, and your payment goes a little more to principal. There's a natural shift. Your very first payment is a lot of interest, very little debt paid off. Your very last payment is a lot of debt paid off and very little interest. You can speed up this shift by making extra payments, and that's how we reduce the amortization. So if you think the bank makes too much money or you pay too much interest, the best thing you can do to speed it up is to pay this mortgage off faster. And to give you an example, if you increase your payments by 8% per month, or you double a single payment a year, you'll pay off your mortgage roughly 4 years faster, and you'll cut the total cost of your mortgage by almost 20% by doubling one payment a year. You throw the Smith maneuver and all that fun stuff on, you can get even better results. But it's really, really important to see how paying off this balance faster ultimately means that this number, the principal you pay off, gets bigger sooner, which then frees up more money for you to invest, which means that you get more money invested for you compounding sooner. And if you want to see the power of that, jump on a compound interest calculator, pick 7, 8, 9, 10%, put $1,000 in and give it 50 years. and you'll see the power of getting money in sooner. There was one thing I wanted to answer, and that was Rob asked a question, not Robinson, but Rob, who's here with us, who's learning about strategy. Would you only invest if the interest cost for you to borrow is lower than your returns? And generally speaking, the answer is yes. From a simplicity standpoint, it would be, it generally speaking would not be a good idea to borrow at 7% and invest at 5%. There are situations or nuances where it could still be beneficial, and I'll get to that in a minute. But generally speaking, it's probably not a good idea, because we have to accept the fact that when we invest, we take a certain degree of risk on, and we need to make sure that we're getting enough positive return that it makes the risk worthwhile. Now, I've got some numbers memorized because I do this a lot. And one of the things to know is that if an individual earns $80,000 a year, I'm going to say these are approximates, but the numbers are pretty close. $80,000 a year earner, so relatively regular person, if they have a $10,000 interest deduction, that is worth to them $2,050. So if they write off that $10,000, they're going to get $2,050 back. They're going to pay that much less in tax. If they earn a $10,000 income, if it is a normal income, they're going to pay $2,050 of tax on that. If they earn a $10,000 dividend, they will pay about $756 of tax. If they earn a $10,000 capital gain, they'll pay about $1,025 of tax. Now, this is assuming a perfect break even. There are situations where, due to the tax code, income will have a lighter tax burden than the deductions you create. But I would never suggest that you invest to break even so you can make a tiny little spread off the deductions. Because if you think about it, to create $10,000 of tax deductible interest, that would be $200,000 you've borrowed at 5% interest. To borrow $200,000 so you could make a $1,300 spread on your taxes per year, not all that sexy. But there are other examples where maybe if you're this is an individual who's in about a 20% tax bracket, relatively low. If you're someone who makes $300,000-$400,000 a year and your tax bracket's 50%, well, let's take one more step back. If you generate a $10,000 tax deduction, that's going to be worth close to $5,000 for you. If you invest and you earn $10,000 in the form of your stocks, if you invest in the stock market, increasing in value, or you invest in real estate and the value goes up 10,000, you will be taxed, but only when you sell that investment. That could be 25, 30, 40 years from now. Maybe it's when you pass on and your kids fight over your portfolio. But at the end of the day, there are situations where you can create tax benefits today, and you can have tax events where you earn money at a future date. And there are situations where this can get more advanced. But one of the reasons why I don't want to go through every accelerator and why I don't want to demonstrate every single nuance of the strategy tonight is that it's really important that each person accepts that their best version of the Smith maneuver is going to be unique to them. Maybe they're not the only one doing what they're doing, but there's not a best way for everybody. There's not the more money you can convert faster is not always better. There's balancing risk. There's balancing the investment aspect. There is the consistency of your income and what your tax situation is. There's also the psychology of it. Investing more money sooner, if the market drops and you're a new investor or someone who gets very stressed very quickly, if you tend to second guess your decisions, you might be really, really unhappy. And that scenario where I showed where someone's investing about $600 a month might be perfect. Because if your $4,000 investments drop 50% and now they're worth $2,000, probably not going to keep you up at night. Whereas if your $400,000 of investments drop and they turn to $200,000, you might be contemplating going for a really, really long drive and never looking your spouse in the eyes again. So it's really important that you match the strategy and how you implement it with who you are as a person. And that's where we as professionals are trained, each in our own respective fields, whether it's an investment-focused realtor, an investment advisor, an accountant, a mortgage broker. We all look for different things, but part of our goal is to get to know you and to provide opinions and guidance and advice. My goal is never to tell you what to do, but it is to give you the pros and cons and to give you my opinion so that hopefully you can take the facts plus what the professional thinks and use that to make a decision what's best for you. And I'm not here to police your decisions or to tell you what you should do, but I do promise every single client that I work with that if I think they're making a mistake, I will be very loud about it. And I will wave and yell and put it in writing and give you voicemails. And, you know, I'm not here to change your mind, but I am here to make sure that as a professional, you know that I think you're doing something foolish. And in the very extreme situations, particularly with my high risk real estate investors, there's been about 7 situations out of 4,000 clients where I've just said, not it. I'm not doing it. I'm not going to participate. So I just want you guys to know what you should be expecting for professionals, but also don't go online, find a way that someone structured the strategy and go, oh, I'll do that. Because it could be really missing opportunities for you, or it could be really magnifying the risks. And it's really important that, yes, this is a wealth creation strategy and it focuses on making our debt cheaper, but it does involve leverage and it does involve investing. And there's risk to that. And it's really, really important that you put, I would argue, more energy into the risk management than worrying about making money. Because if you focus on how do you keep things as safe as you possibly can, and your investment advisor is working with you to do that, and your accountant and your mortgage broker, the rest will come. If you invest with a sense of discipline and you're responsible and you're not chasing crazy returns, but rather you're thinking, how do I make this a win 30 years from now and have consistency? I can't guarantee it, but you probably will do really, really well with the strategy. So that's kind of the wrap of today. I am going to be working on putting together some resources to show the different accelerators. But I really, really do suggest that you be honest with yourself about what your financial understanding is. And that doesn't mean don't go learn the complex stuff if you're just starting out, but take this one bite at a time. Because one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is that they're new to the strategy and they're learning to budget and they're learning about investment savings and how to save for the retirement. And next thing you know, they're in the middle of trying to crunch a debt swap while cash damming and, you know, oh, how do I try to min-max everything? And your head's going to explode. There's lots of professionals that do this type of stuff for a living that don't fully grasp the strategy. It takes time, and I think it's important to be comfortable with it, but just take it one step at a time. And I promise you, I'm not that smart. I'm really not. I've just done this a lot. It doesn't take a lot of brain power to really grasp the Smith maneuver. It literally breaks down into 4 key concepts, and there's a couple little add-ons you can do. But the important thing is understanding the basics. And when you learn one layer, the next layer makes a lot of sense. When you understand that borrowing with the reasonable expectation of earning income equals you get a tax deduction from that interest, then it makes a little more sense why, hey, you shouldn't pay the interest on that debt with your paycheck. You should pay down your non-tax deductible mortgage first, then borrow in a tax deductible way to pay for that tax deductible interest. Because now you have the same amount of debt, but a larger pool of tax deductible funds. If I just tell that to a random stranger, they're going to be like, what? Whereas if you start to grasp the basics of the strategy, it just gets a little easier. Things start to click. That's the best advice I have for you all personally. There's a couple questions I'm going to tackle if you guys want to stick around. Otherwise, thanks for coming out. So if we have a very low mortgage rate, I'm conflicted in paying off the mortgage, but I know that the rate in a few years will increase at renewal and go up significantly. So this is one of the most common obstacles that I'm seeing as a Smith Maneuver certified mortgage broker right now. The short answer is that there's not a clear-cut decision, and it depends on your situation. If you've almost finished paying off your mortgage and you've got a 1.5% rate, and the only way that you can implement the strategy is by breaking that mortgage, it's probably not going to make sense. But if you've got $1 million mortgage at 2% interest and your renewal's in 9 months, and you're in a situation where your $1 million is going to renew no matter what in 9 months, and then you're going to pay 5% interest on that $1 million. If your tax bracket's really high, if you've got a lot of money and we can max your prepayment before your mortgage renews, and we can start to manipulate the numbers. There are situations where it makes sense to pay off low cost debt and invest at a higher cost, because that difference between those two debts is temporary. But generally speaking, if you've got a low interest rate and you've got it for a while, and someone's trying to convince you that you should give that up and move to a higher interest rate, if they're not showing you actual math and data to support why they're making that statement, and please, fully, if someone makes that recommendation, tell them to prove it or shove it. Because odds are, if someone's pushing you and they don't have actual data to show you, they're being a salesperson. I can tell you that I've probably come across about 200 situations where someone's been in a similar situation to what Jane's asking, with a low interest rate and they're not sure what to do. 98% of the time, my advice has been, let's learn about the strategy, but let's wait. Now, there's situations where we can port a mortgage, get them the readvanceable product, and they can do it right away. There are circumstances where it can make sense, but almost never are we having a client pay a penalty to get out of a very low interest rate to move to a higher rate. And the reason for that is when we break down the math, we have to look at what is the interest difference between the current mortgage they have for the remainder of the term. So let's say they have a 2% interest rate for 3 years left. First thing we have to do is, if they're going to go from 2% to 5%, that means there's a 3% difference on the mortgage. So that's going to mean, let me do the math real quick. $100 times, it's going to be $3,000 per year per 100,000 they owe. So they're going to have a big jump in cost. If they owe $1 million, like that could be a $90,000 interest difference. It's a lot of money. But hey, let's be neutral. Let's keep going through this. They're also going to have to trigger a penalty because they're going to have to break the mortgage. They're also going to have to pay legal fees. I'll make up a number. Let's say it's going to cost an extra $100,000 to break their mortgage to get into a Smith Maneuver friendly product 3 years faster. Well, I better be able to show, if I'm going to try to convince a client to do this, that if they do this, they're certain, because they know for sure they're going to spend that extra money. 100% it will cost them that $100,000. Well, I better be pretty damn certain that they're going to benefit at least $120,000, $130,000, $140,000 in 3 years, which is really fast to do this. And the reality is that there isn't that certainty. We don't know what the stock market's going to do. The last thing I want to do is see a client take a 5-year fixed at 5%, let's say, because they do this. And in 3 years, when they should be renewing, now rates are 3%. And now they're locked in for an extra 2 years at a higher interest rate because I got all excited as a salesperson and convinced them that they should pay an extra $100,000 to do this early. So my best advice is, if you're in a situation like that, it's okay to ask the questions, but no, odds are the right choice is probably going to be to wait. If you're in a really high tax bracket or your situation's somewhat unique or there's a larger debt, there are very, very rare, like 2 out of 100 situations that make sense. And if anyone ever gives you any advice that doesn't seem right to you, it doesn't matter what it is, tell them to prove it. If you're working with professionals, whether it's accountants, financial planners, mortgage brokers, realtors, if they push you to do something or say this is the right choice, it is 100% your job as a client and a consumer and the person who's taking on the risk to say why. Show me why this makes sense. So, and you will absolutely piss off some experienced mortgage brokers, financial advisors, accountants, because they're not used to people just being questioning them. But at the end of the day, if you're going to make a big decision and you're going to change your financial future, make sure you know why. There's a reason the Smith Maneuver calculator exists. There's a reason why there's a lot of this data that I try to show my clients. It's a lot easier for me to show a client that they may want to consider implementing the strategy without making any crazy changes. But the more changes that I suggest, the more I need to show up with the data to say why this makes sense. And I'll give you guys a very real world example. We've had clients consider moving from variable products to fixed products, and they pay a penalty to do so. And the only time they do so is when they go to their bank and they see what their option is to lock in. Because in this situation, it's a case where clients have decided they want to lock in. We figure out what the cost of locking in is. If I can then beat that cost by enough to save them a meaningful amount of money and to cover all the costs of changing lenders, then I will propose they consider changing lenders. If I can't demonstrate the math that shows it makes sense for them to do this, I will never, ever, ever suggest they change lenders, because why would they? If there's not a benefit, why are you going to do it? So that's kind of the wrap. It doesn't look like anybody else is asking questions. So if you guys do have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we all get to spend a nice long weekend with our family and hopefully have a nice dinner. We got one more question. Oh, two questions. Someone's asking, how do you manage when a client has a margin account and wants to use the maneuver? If you have a movement afterwards, oh, okay, I'll answer that after, but long story short for everybody, margin account and Smith maneuver, at least in my opinion, don't mix. You're already dealing with leverage once. Don't double down on more leverage. Ultimately, though, you should talk to a financial advisor or planner about the pros and cons of margin accounts, but you can blow both your feet off of the margin account really quickly in a bad market. It's Smith maneuver is one thing. You have to worry about if the whole banking system collapses, your home equity line of credit could get called. That's a pretty rare thing. I've never heard of a situation of it happening in Canada. It happened in the US in 2008, but it's pretty rare. If you have a margin account and the market drops 50%, it's guaranteed that the bank's going to say, hey, you got to go sell your investments and give us our money back. And all of a sudden you've just lost $100,000 and you're a bystander as it happens. I'll explain the spreadsheet after, Damien. Yes, I will be posting a replay of this. And then does a blend and extend make sense if at renewal, if it's a good rate? If you're at your renewal date, typically speaking, we'll just refinance because there's nothing to blend. You're in an open status when you hit your renewal date, which means you can make any change you want with your mortgage without cost or penalty, as long as you don't have to redo the charge on title. But worst case, that's a small cost. Blend and extend. So this is kind of off the Smith maneuver, but there's two types of options with a mortgage that's midterm. So let's say you took a 5-year fixed, you're 2 years in, you've got 3 years left. You can go to your bank, and the one everybody knows is a blend and extend. They'll take your 3 years remaining and they'll blend it with, let's say, a new 5-year product, and you'll get a new 5-year term, and they calculate the rates. What they don't tell you usually is they actually hide the penalty in that new rate. You are almost always paying a penalty. It's hidden it. There's a way you can do it without a penalty, and that's called a blend to term. So it's worth asking your bank if there's a blend to term option as well, and weighing up the difference in rates. Ultimately, if they hide a penalty in your mortgage, but you're happy with what your option is, blending and extending, it can make sense. But just know that by no means blend and extends are not inherently free. They're a very common thing where the bank, you're captive, that you've gone to your lender and said, hey, I want to, rates have dropped. I want to extend my term and average my rate lower. You're not shopping that option. Very rarely are they showing you the math of how do they come to the number they give you. And it is one of the most common areas where the bank can add 40 basis points. We'll make an extra 20 grand off this client. So I'm not saying they all do it, but the vast majority of lenders I've seen do hide penalties in blend and extends. Without seeing the numbers of what you're being offered, I generally wouldn't suggest it. It's situationally blend and extends or blend to terms can be good, but the reality is interest rates are overall declining right now. There's now calls from major predictors of the market saying there's going to be probably 3 cuts towards the end of the year. And there's even, I forget if it's a 14 or 20% chance that we'll see a 0.25% cut next Wednesday. Probably won't happen, but we're heading in the direction. If things don't change, we're probably going to start to see interest rates drop. But we know that OPEC has cut oil production, so gas prices are probably going to go up. We just today had job stats come out for Canada, and we got more jobs, which is good news unless you want low interest rates. So things are changing almost week by week. And if you don't believe me, go Canada Market Watch 5-year bond yields, set a 12-month view on 5-year bonds, and you'll see it go whoop, 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 whoop. It's done it like 5 or 6 times. It's gone up like 0.5 to 0.75 and then dropped. The best takeaway I can give any of you guys on interest rates is it's really volatile, and the pattern of what rates are doing can change for almost any time, any reason. Maybe there's people smarter than I out there that can predict interest rates, but the Bank of Canada is doing a really terrible job at it. I know Andrew doesn't know. I know I don't know. It's economic, it's political, it's tied to inflation. Nobody knows what's going to happen. And if someone's telling you they know rates will drop, you should probably fire them. If someone's telling you that they know rates will go up, you should probably fire them. The only exception is we can usually predict rates 2 to 3 weeks in advance based on bond yields. That's the only exception. Beyond that, you know, I'm sure someone on YouTube, when I post this, will have a PhD in economics and they'll tell me, oh, well, 6 weeks out, we can predict using inverse T-bond swaps or something. But no one that you're going to work with is going to be able to give you any meaningful prediction of what interest rates are going to do long term. So, you know, even at the highest level where the people in the stock market are betting billions of dollars on what rates will do, they're betting. And they might be good at it, but they're betting. And the last thing you want to do is bet your house or your future on what interest rates will do. So my best advice is make the decision with the worst case scenario you're happiest with. It's the best way to go if you've got no good choices.